ask a question here. Raise your hand if you think we make about 200 decisions per day. Anybody for 200 decisions per day? No? All right, raise your hand if you think we make about 2,000 decisions per day. All right, I'm going to say 60%. All right, 20,000. All right, maybe 30%, 40%. What was that? Oh yeah, I mean this is definitely a round number. The information of getting to that decision is an interesting thing to study on its own. So we had most people think that it was about 2,000, and about 30–40% think it was 20,000. So we make about 35,000 decisions every day, according to research. And importantly, 95% of those decisions we make subconsciously. So do you have time to think about anybody want to do math quick? 3,200 and something decisions? No? Would your day be able to function? Right? No, it can't. So if we are making that many decisions, right, 95% of them are subconscious, we can't think of these things. We can't think them through. We can't do a reason, analysis of it. So now the question is, what is guiding those 35,000 decisions? If we can't think about it, we don't have time, we would drive ourselves and our family crazy, right? What is the thing that's guiding those 35,000 decisions? Any thoughts before we move on?
Like subconscious.
On how we operate on the subconscious level. All right, so the answer is persuasion. We are always persuaded. It doesn't always have to be somebody is intentionally trying to persuade us, right? Which is a really common thing. But we are always being persuaded. And we're doing it at the subconscious level because 32,000 something decisions are made on the subconscious level. And so when we relate it to our society being divided, we have to realize, say, hey, you know what? Maybe we're being divided by design, not that there's a natural disagreement that we have. So we're going to talk about three parts. Like I said, I will try and keep us on track. So part one, we're going to go over quick, which is the foundation, how persuasion works. We're going to talk about heuristics, mental shortcuts, bias, and priming. Then we're going to go to part two, which is the shift from classical persuasion to what I call perpetual persuasion. And then part three is the path forward. All right, we're divided. Why is that? What do we do about it? All right, so part one. First, persuasion is often sort of mislabeled, where we think it's convincing. Somebody's convincing us, or we're being convinced of something. That might be the goal. That might be what happened. But what happened is we're already making these decisions, which we're going to talk about in the next couple of slides. So we're already making decisions based on how we react. So it's more of the fact that we're leaning in a direction, and we'll show why we're leaning in that direction. And of course, once we are leaning in that direction, people can then capitalize on it. Marketers, advertisers, whatever it may be, news sources. All right, so why do we lean? We lean because of what we reference, heuristics, mental shortcuts, which I'm assuming most of us have come across. And I'm going to give some examples of heuristics just to pave the way of what we're going to talk about. But we always have to remember that if you know which way somebody may lean towards something, well, then it opens the door to what? If I know, Gordon, right? If I know you're leaning toward something, if I present something a certain way, well, I can be persuasive, right? It's not a hard and fast where 100%, but 35,000 decisions a day. If we know where people are leaning, we can really, really be persuasive if we understand how it works. All right, so there's hundreds of heuristics. I keep a list of ones I've come across in my life, whether it be interaction, news, whatever it may be, and I'm up to 142. So I have a document of 142 heuristics that I went back and looked to see if there's research. Every single one there's been research on that I've come across. So it's very prominent in there. So once we see them, we'll better understand how people think. exploit or capitalize on. So one thing to note that's really important is a persuasion gap. There's two pieces here. So research shows that most people don't recognize persuasion when it's happening. We don't even know it. Even when we're trained, we tend not to acknowledge or identify or even know that it's happening. The other thing that's important is that we mostly focus on persuasion as how do we persuade others. We spend very little time on how do we identify that we're being persuaded. How do we identify that? And that's an important element in this persuasion gap, is to recognize that even in classes that teach persuasion, I teach persuasion class, I spend, 5% of the time on how to combat being persuaded, right? The rest of the time is how can you be influential? And that's what you take a sales course, you take a number of communications course, how can we be persuasive? Not how do you, fight against it. All right, social proof. This is one that's common that most people are familiar with. And so I'll ask by a raise of hands, who here would eat at a restaurant with a 2.5 star Google rating? I always get one. I don't know. All right, why is it that other than our single person, why is it that you wouldn't eat there? Anyone? Why is it that you wouldn't eat there? What was that? You don't trust it. So why do you trust a 4-star restaurant or a 4.5? Because other people they labeled it as good for whatever reason. So when you're on vacation, you're Googling whatever, subconsciously you're just looking at the 4.4, 4.3. You see a 3.9, you're like, ooh, and you move on. As a marketer, because I started off by telling you guys a long history of marketing and communications, I can tell you that if you have a restaurant and you have a 2.5 rating, and you come to me and you're like, hey, I want a 4+ rating, what can you do? I can get you a 4+ rating without you changing your staff, without you changing the food, without you changing the decor, nothing. I can get you a 4.5 rating. The food didn't change, nothing's changed, right? But all of a sudden the ratings changed, and now all of us, we're like, yeah, I'll go. So you who's gonna go to the 2.5, right? Maybe some of these restaurants are good, they just don't have good persuaders, they don't have good marketers, right? Because it's very easy. I won't get into the technical way to do it, but yes, you can go, I can spend a couple weeks and get a restaurant to go from a low rating to a much higher rating. All right, the next one we're going to talk about is anchoring. Anchoring is interesting for several reasons. One, it sort of kicked me off many, many years ago when I was in my early 20s, like 3-4 years ago, right? Into thinking about this sort of realm, and that's how I got into communication. Is the first time, I don't remember the numbers, I made them up. The first time that I went out to dinner and thought I would buy a bottle of wine, I had this mental budget in my mind of $30. It was a long time ago, right? $30 doesn't even exist for going out for a bottle of wine now. And so I had this mental budget, this is what I was going to do. And so I never ordered a bottle of wine before. I didn't know how to do, didn't know anything. It was an expensive restaurant, it was on vacation, I was in Hawaii. And the server talks and says, oh, well, I have this bottle of Chateau, whatever it may be. And it was, hundreds of dollars, right? It was a $200 bottle of wine. She saw my face that I was like, there's no way. And then she's like, I also have this bottle of wine for $70. I'm like, yes, I'll take it, right? So not only did I spend twice my budget, I was happy to do it. I was so relieved because that's anchoring. The first thing that was presented to me, right, persuaded me to think, yeah, I'm okay spending twice the amount of money. And this happens to us every day. You want to go buy a jacket, right? And you're like, I'm going to spend $100, right, for a jacket, $150, right? And you walk into the store, and the first rack of jackets are, $500, and you're like, I'll spend $500. And then you walk in the second rack, it's $250, and you're like, whew, man, that's a lot cheaper. Now you feel good about $250, which is, again, twice your budget. So this is approaches by design. Once somebody can tend to predict where you're going to lean, they can then persuade you. This next one starts to get more into where we're going about being a divided society, false consensus of that. What happens to all of us is that, say there's some social post, somebody posts something, our friend, we agree with their post, we like it, we share it, whatever, and then we post something about it, and then some other friends like what we post and they share it, and then they post something positive about what we do, and then whatever, we like it, and so suddenly it feels like everyone thinks this way, right? But really it's this tiny little bubble that we're in, but we get this false consensus effect where we're comfortable, we're confident, like we're in the right. Everybody thinks what I think. All right, the next one, commitment and consistency. This is a persuasion principle from Dr. Cialdini, who wrote a great book, Influence and Social Persuasion and Social Influence. And so he calls one of these principles called commitment and consistency. And it's really powerful. The example that I'll use before we get into it is, let's say you walk in through campus and you're trying to raise money for the Maricopa, that's our county, if you're not from here, Maricopa Animal Shelter. And you want to raise $5. You're asking people for $5. Well, it's $5. You're going to get people who give you $5. However, if you ask a question prior to asking them for $5, you say, hey, do you like puppies? Do you like puppies? Right. Nobody's ever said no. If someone said no, I'd be like, ow. Yeah. So if you like puppies, what happened is you just made a public commitment. Not this grand commitment, but it's public. In front of that other person, you just made a commitment to something. So we have an urge to stay consistent with whatever we commit to. So it's called commitment and consistency. If you can get somebody to commit to something, right, like I like puppies. Now, the number that, the volume of $5 donations that you get go up astronomically. $5 is not a high bar anyway. So once you get somebody to publicly commit something, and if you can do it where if you're on, say, Tempe campus where it's busy and more congested than the Phoenix campus. If you're on the Tempe campus and you decide, I'm going to ask when I see students in groups. So the more public the commitment, the stronger the urge to stay consistent. So if you go up to people and there's 5 people in there and you're like, hey, do you like puppies? And you get an answer from every one of them, and then you ask for $5. That public commitment is now stronger. Now relate that to social posts, that the false consensus we talked about earlier. Now all of a sudden you're posting something on social media, a bazillion people are seeing it, all your friends and family and that sort of thing. Your urge to stay consistent with that public commitment is really powerful, and that is part of what we're going to talk about, perpetual persuasion. Anyway, I have it in red here. Keep this in mind because it sets the stage for exploitation and perpetual persuasion. So we talked about those few principles, heuristics. But what we're going to do, we're going to do is we're going to look at the through the lens of what's called priming, the priming heuristic. So priming is a cognitive heuristic where exposure to the first stimuli sort of follows through on how we react to other stuff, usually when it's one-on-one with the person. So we're going to just remember, we're going to use priming now as an example. So I'm going to explain it. This is what classical priming looks like. And I have classical and perpetual persuasion, classical and perpetual priming. So classical looks like this. This is a real example of something that I'll always remember. So if anybody teaches public speaking, you're probably come across several students who are terrified. So I had one student show up, they were in the class, and right before the class started, they had got up and walked out. I didn't think anything of it, but they didn't come back. But I did see them a couple times peeking in. I saw them peeking in through the window. Class was over. Everybody walks out, come in, and they're like, I need to do this. I'm terrified. I thought you were going to do introductions. Couldn't do it. Walked out. And so they told me, I'm going to commit. I'm going to be here. This is something so important to me. It's something I forced myself to take this class. It's not in their major. And so they're really like immediately showing me this is a student that really wants to do this, right? That student, not intentionally, maybe, not intentionally, they prime me. They prime me that they want to learn, that they want to overcome their fear, that they want to be here. So now ask yourself, what is the frame, the lens that I'm looking through any future ask from this student? Hey, I know it's due on Tuesday, can I submit it on Wednesday? I have something else. I'm already looking at this as a student who is really eager to learn, a good student. They've primed me, right? Not in any malicious way, but they have primed me that, you know what, I'm looking at it through a positive way. You just compare it to a student who I'm sure we will have, who is constantly has an excuse for something, right? They primed us to our alerts up, like I ain't falling for this again, right? And so that's how priming works. Is you can prime your, I hate to use this word, your target, right? By going ahead and doing something that would make them lean into you and look at you in a positive light for any future ask, because that's a lot of what persuasion is. It's a future ask, intentional or unintentional. There's usually a future ask. All right, so let's move on. So there's a lot of research. I just picked one that I tend to stick with, that shows that priming works really well, but there's a natural decay. As time goes on, that prime thing just sort of decays. That student that, told me about, how fearful they were and they really want to do this, occasionally something came up throughout the semester where we talked and they were doing really well and they mentioned it, right? So the priming had a little bit of reinforcement. But for the most part, there was definitely a decay. And so that's classical priming. There is just simply a decay. It's not as powerful on day 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever it may be. However, in red, unless it's repeatedly reinforced. And now we're going to get into perpetual priming. So reminder, classical priming is the data set of one or just a few, and then there's the decay. And now we're going to show an example of how powerful priming is, classical priming, how powerful it is before we get into perpetual. So in 2023, I don't know if anybody knows, I call it the Acorn shooting. Does anybody know the video, the incident? So not that long ago, 2023 in Florida. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So what happened is there was a lady called the cops, said her boyfriend stole her car. Cops show up, multiple cops show up. They're talking to her, and they're asking her, a few questions on here. And so she tells him, like, yeah, he took my car. He wasn't supposed to. I didn't think he could. He stole it, whatever. And so everything's really calm. The suspect shows up. So the suspect shows up. He is remorseful. He's very calm. There's no conflict or anything. The videos of this. And so, that's it. And, they search him. They handcuff him behind his back. And they put him in the back of the patrol car. During the conversation, the cops ask a normal question: does the suspect have any weapons? And she's like, yeah, I think he has a gun. What kind? She has no clue. She shows a picture of the gun on her phone, right? So this is what happens. And then we're going to watch the video from the 2 police officers, their body cam at the same time. So we'll see the one and the other, but they're timed the same.
you know you're talking to Cronkite, you're in. Okay, it's okay.
What? Oh! Okay, right there? Jesse! Jesse, are you okay? Get it out! Jesse! Get back! Where is he? Where is he? Oh. 43, give me traffic. Shots fired. I'm deputy down.
Jesse, come back.
Dude, my head. My legs went numb when it hit. Alright, I don't know, my legs went numb for a second. I heard a pop come from.
Go this way. You move?
Yeah. I got
video. So, amazingly, the guy was not harmed, right? 22 shots were fired. So let's just go over this. So what happened is, after an investigation, it was an acorn that fell and hit the top of the cop car as he was walking past it. We can't see it in here, but if you freeze it and kind of zoom in, they actually found, as you can see, they got it on his camera, the acorn falling. So it was an acorn that, that fell. So he was convinced that it was a gunshot, right? He feels himself get hit. He mentioned several times his legs are numb. I'm hit. Was he hit? No. That's how powerful some of this stuff is. He empties his clip. He drops his clip, reloads. His partner empties his clip. There's 22 shots fired into the cop. Anyway, after the threat, I put in quotes there, is passed, he's still convinced, telling another cop, because this is now a couple minutes later, we're just seeing the clip there. He's telling other officers, sorry, that's my Long Island accent coming out, other officers, he's telling other officers his legs are numb. So this went on, and he's convinced. Did you see at the one point when they flipped to his partner's camp? He's crawling. He can't even walk. He was never hit, right? And let's see, and then the officer, he has to dismiss the facts. I searched this guy. I put him in handcuffs, and I put him in the back of the car. So he had to dismiss these facts. That's how powerful priming is, and we'll talk about one item I left off intentionally to show priming is. One more data point. The picture that the girlfriend showed to the cops had the gun, had a silencer on it. So this officer is now so primed because of that silencer, because an acorn hitting the top of a car sounds nothing like a gunshot, right? Has anybody been around an actual gunman who fired a handgun? 1, 2, 3. It is definitively a gunshot, right? It is powerful, right? But he is primed because of that sound, which I'll go into the next one, because he knows the guy owns a gun with a silencer, so that sound was him thinking that he was shot at with a silencer. So we're going to go from classical to perpetual in a minute. Now, this was a one-time thing, a one-time active, vivid frame. The girlfriend shows a picture of the gun. So that was powerful enough for him to say, I patted him down, I searched him, handcuffed him, he's in the back of the car. Oh, gone, out of his head. It's the frame, that vivid frame was still in his mind. And so like we talked about earlier, well, you know what? Priming decays over time. And so if a couple hours, a couple days went past, right? That urgency, that sense of urgency of having a gun and a silencer would start to decay a bit. So we're gonna stop and go a different direction before we come back to that. So I want to ask a question. I know now that we're talking about this, it's sort of a loaded question, and I'm priming you guys, so I won't get a real, honest answer. There's every year there's this global peace index study, and so in 2025, which is the latest one that I have, out of 168 countries, do you think the U.S. for peace and safety lands, I don't know, in the top 50%? Raise your hand. Who's saying? Heck no.
What does the peace index actually measure?
There's 23 things that it measures: safety, violence, freedom.
Right? This isn't strictly within the country.
Yeah, and so they rank all 168 countries. And so, how many people think U.S. is in the bottom? 50%. All right. Half the people. All right, what about Ghana? What do you think Ghana lands? Top 50%? All right, bottom 50%? All right. If we were talking about this without this presentation of what we've been talking about, most Americans think that the United States is way up there. Most American thinks that Ghana or any African country is way down there. And there's a reason for that. By the way, the U.S. is 128, Ghana is 61st. Not a little difference, right? Pretty significant. So now we're going to look at the mean world syndrome. So George Gerbner was a researcher. He did this in the 60s into the 70s. So during his time, right, we had like 4 TV stations. But during his time, he's like, we are inundated with data, right? We were, right? For, you know, if you look at it from the perspective of being in the 60s. So what he did is, he did this research, which he eventually called the mean world syndrome, where people who watched a lot of news, consumed a lot of TV, they thought the world was meaner than it actually is. And so that's the, you know, the mean world syndrome. We probably see this, you know, every day. I tend to pick on my dad quite a bit. I went to Portugal last summer with my wife. Yes, it was amazing, right? So my dad says to me, "You went to Portugal?" He couldn't pick out Portugal on the map. He said, "You went to Portugal?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "What are you gonna do?" I was like, "I don't know, eat, right? That's what we do, we eat." And he's like, "Well, but can you just walk around?" And I'm like, "Yes." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He just panicked. He thinks everything is so dangerous, right? The mean world syndrome. He consumes a lot of news, right? And so he's thinking he can't even go there. He doesn't even understand. I have my best friend travels to Mexico a couple times a year. His family's from Mexico. He goes and visits a couple times a year. My dad is like, "What does he do?" I was like, "Well, Ramon likes to mountain bike, so he bikes a lot." I say he loves coffee. He visits different coffee shops all over the place. And him and his wife love to go out to eat. They go out to eat.
Turns out tacos are really good.
Huh?
Turns out tacos are really good.
Yeah, right. There's a lot of good food. So he's a perfect example of the mean world syndrome really taking, rearing its head in reality. All right, so now we're going to go to perpetual priming. So now let's look at the mean world syndrome in 2026, which is from the 60s. We're 60-something years later. Let's just say 6 decades later. We had 4 stations back then. Yes?
No, 5 minutes.
What?
5 minutes.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll have to speed up here. 2026. This is some of the data that's coming to us. We have on average 82 emails a day, 5 gigs of video content that we're downloading, 2.5 gigs of social feed content that we're scrolling through. We have nonstop alerts, bing, bing, bing on our phone. Anyway, 24/7, and in red, it's curated for us. So the more we like and share something, the more we see that sort of thing. The problem is, we still have a 1970s brain, which we thought back then was a lot of data coming to us, and it was worth studying, and it was significantly impacted how people look at the world. Now the amount of data that we consume is not even related, you can't even relate it to what was happening back in the 60s. So now let's look at, we'll go back to Officer Hernandez and the perpetual priming. So Officer Hernandez and a lot of police officers, well, they see videos of cops getting ambushed, right? One of their police friends will share a video, and then somebody will like it, and then they'll share it. Then the moment you do that, all of a sudden, your feed, you start getting more and more stuff like that. I think we're all aware of how this works. I know a lot of people make a comment like, sometimes I just say something and all of a sudden I start getting, things, on my phone about what I was thinking or something like that. But when we search for something, or we watch something, we like something, whatever it may be, we start getting that. And so it then perpetuates. Little trick, by the way, if you want something from your significant other for a birthday or something, grab their phone and search for it 3 or 4 times without them knowing. And then just leave it aside. And they're gonna be like, why is this campy gear coming up all the time, So another thing that we have here is war on police news cycle. So if they're watching the news and they see this and their friends share it, whatever, it's more thing. Another thing that I put is pop culture is really important. Movies like John Wick, there's 4 John Wicks now. He kills hundreds of people with a silencer, right? Throughout the movie, that's all he hears, him shoot people in the head with the silencer, right? That plays a role in perpetual priming because we're thinking that sound now, and that's what that acorn sounded like. Officer group chats, private group chats where they're talking. Are they talking? Do you think police officers are sending messages to each other saying, I had the nicest encounter today with society, right? That's not what's happening, right? What's happening is they're sharing their frustrations or their struggles, whatever it may be. Their training is mostly threat focused, right? We always read about complaints that we wish departments were trained more in de-escalation. However, it's a lot of, hey, you're under threat, this is what you gotta do, right? That's the mindset, they're primed for that. And then, of course, the important thing, the algorithmic social feed, that is nonstop. All right, I'm going to skip this. So the path forward, why we're divided and what we can do. So as Harry pointed out, we're more connected than ever, yet we're more divided than ever. The reason is because we are chronically primed and there is no delay. Right? So I talk about perpetual persuasion, perpetual priming, persuasion being the big umbrella one. We are perpetually persuaded, and we don't have time for that delay, that decay, that will lessen that priming. This is a study from a year ago. I would imagine it's even worse. The average American spends about 6 hours, 40 minutes per day consuming some sort of media from the internet. 6 hours, that's 1/3 of our waking day. Go back to our 1970s brain, right? So keep that in mind for perpetual priming because that's the data we're getting nonstop. So how does perpetual priming create division? Anybody want to help me before I answer? Well, we always look at outgroups as the others, right? It's a natural thing. I'm sure it's part of a lot of our classes and our curriculum. It's evolutionary. It's a normal thing. But now we're battling on 2 fronts, right? Bombarded by nonstop frames showing the other, right? The 6 hours plus that we're watching, it is definitely showing people as the other, the outgroups. And then the other thing is our public comments are so tied to our identity, the commitment and consistency we talked about. And in the 1970s, that was so innocent, it was so innocuous, right? It looks like baby stuff back then, right? What public commitment did they have? Maybe somebody's at a local bar talking about the upcoming election or whatever it may be. Now it's so easy to publicly commit to something that we have this urge to stay consistent, even when we get to the point where, I'm kind of questioning it. It's like double down, triple down, right? People have this real strong urge to stay consistent. So those 2 things are what's causing perpetual priming. Before any conversation starts, we're arriving with a baseline and a publicly invested identity. That's how we're starting any conversation now. Because we liked it, we posted it, we said it in here at a conference, I stated something, and we tried to stay commitment in that. And so today is something our 1970 brain has never had time to evolve to handle. Harry's telling me you got a minute. And so let me see if I can go here. So we talked about how research shows that priming decays over time unless it's constantly reinforced. There's other elements to that same study. If something is tied to identity or a goal, then it's even stronger when it's constantly reinforced. And it becomes hard for people to break out because the decay does not happen. There's no chance for decay. So what do we do? Try to be quick here. First, name it detainment, right? And so if we can stop and identify persuasion, if we're aware of it, we can identify persuasive techniques, active, intentional, or just by chance. If we do, well, let's take one thing we can start pinning. I sort of did it to you guys in the beginning. I gave you the option of 200, 2,000, 20,000. I anchored. I got you into a bucket to think about because I wanted my 35,000 to be a bold statement, right? So that's why I didn't do 3,000, 30,000, right? I kept it short, knowing most people normally pick 20,000. Now I can still present a grand number because it's interesting. And so we have to recognize that these things are happening to us, every day. All right, thanks.